Hi everyone and welcome to my penultimate page from my 12 Journals of 2016 series. One more page to go and I will then show you how to make the cover, or I think it might be covers, when I split this into 2 volumes. This has been a fun series. Obviously I have been using Tim's 12 tags of 2016 as my inspiration. Decided not to make tags in 2016. I've made so many tags that I decided I wanted to make journal pages, and you will see that I'm going to carry this on. Tim is retiring his 12 tag series and I am going to carry on with my 12 journals. So I'm going to call it my 2017 journal series or something similar, but I'll tell you more about that in a video slightly later on. I intend to start mid-February with my very first video and I hope that you will be playing along. So back to this catch-up page for 2016. So this is my photograph and Tim's original tag, which inspired me to create this page. So he did a sort of patina paint effect background, and he also did a resist technique. So I'm going to go with the resist technique that's slightly different, and I've printed this picture of me thinking twice onto a page ready to cut out my journal page. So firstly, apologies that I sound a little bit bunged up on this video, or a lot bunged up. I'm suffering from a little bit of a head cold, so I hope that doesn't detract too much and that my voice lasts to the end of the video. So what have I done so far? I've taken an image into Photoshop, an image that you've seen me use before, and I've turned it into a kind of stamp. I've just used one of the filters in Photoshop, and then I've put a mirror image on my page, bearing in mind how big my page is. I've worked out the size of my print and printed it onto the page that I intend to use. So now I'm cutting it into the size that you've seen me cut for all my pages, but trying to keep those images central on the page. The measurement for all these journal pages is 7 inches by 10¼ inches. The card I've used is quite thin because I needed it to go through the printer. I'm going to cut out 2 tags in the same colour. So the tag measurement is 5¼ by 6 inches. And like I said, I'm going to cut out 2 because I need them to be a little bit more sturdy than the cardstock is presently. So this was the second half of my 2016 journal, and I've got July and August, and today I'm working on September, so the page that follows on from those 2. So because I want to cover my page in a patina effect, or a patina paint effect, I want to protect my image, so hence the sort of nod to a resist technique. I'm using a gloss multi-medium in order to do this, and I'm literally just painting it over my image. So the part of the image that I want to protect. Not too fussy about the hair, but I will just cover it over to seal that ink into place as I start to work with the different paints that I'm going to use to create a metallic effect. So I'm going to dry off that first layer, and then I'm going to repeat the process. So just paying attention to that profile in particular and around the hand area to make sure that that's nice and clean and follows the line, and then filling in the rest of the image with the gloss medium. Drying everything off once more, and then I want to create a border. Now in hindsight I would have liked to have created the border all the way around, but that's not the way I cut it out, so I'm going to have a border around 3 of my edges. So I'm just drawing a random wiggly line using my black Faber-Castell pen, and then I'm just going to doodle a design all the way around the edge. The first thing that I'm going to do is just create a series of random stripes, sometimes leaving narrow areas and sometimes wider areas. And then I'm coming back in and just doodling some stripes, and I'm also going to add some circles into the mix. So I've got some plain, some stripy and some dotty. And then I need to protect that area as well. So again, I'm using this glaze or gloss medium. I think actually this is called a glaze. It's by Faber-Castell. But a gloss medium like the Ranger multi-medium that has a gloss finish, or any kind of gloss finish medium would work. It's just to protect this area, and bear in mind that I am working on a permanent pen. If this was a water-based pen that I'd use to doodle the border, I might have a bit of difficulty glazing over it with a medium, so this is a permanent pen once it's dry. Again, I'm drying that off, and then I will add a second layer of the gloss medium. And then I want to fill in the background area with a sort of patina or copper patina look background. And I'm using my distress paints in order to do that. I've got this colour, which is, although it looks copper, it's actually called bronze. And I am going to fill in the background to start with, just roughly. And you can see, because I've got that gloss medium in place, I can take a baby wipe and remove any paint that I get on my border or on my face. So I'm working a little section at a time to make sure that the paint doesn't dry and that I can remove the paint that I don't want. So that's my base coat down, and then I can from there start to build what I'm hoping will look like an aged copper background. I'm going to be using a sort of stippling technique in order to create the background, and I'm using wild honey, evergreen bough and peeled paint in with that bronze distress paint. And again, every time I get some on my border or on my face, I'm going to wipe it off with a baby wipe. I'm not too worried about the hair area, and you'll see why later on. Because I'm going to be using another medium on top of this to get more texture, I'm just looking for something that gives the impression of aged copper rather than being really perfect at this stage. So all I'm going to be doing is stippling on different areas of colour until I'm happy with the effect. So the more you stipple, the more you blend those colours in, and the lighter you are with the brush, the more obvious the dots of colour and oxidization will be on your paint effect. So just keep going until you're happy with the final result. Bear in mind that distress paint dries quite shiny itself, and I'm also going to get rid of my hair at this point just to colour it over slightly, because I'm going to be using some embossing paste on top of this to give texture. And I just want to add one further colour, which is a little bit of black soot, and I'm doing that very, very lightly. And it just helps bring the colours of the patina in with the black that I've used for the border and the stamping. Now I've given this a little while to dry to make sure that this next stage, which is scoring the gusset, which you can see I've already started, I'm scoring with the page in the landscape position at 5 inches and then rotating the page to score again at 5 inches, and this will give me a 1/4 of an inch gusset. And this gusset allows me to use plenty of embellishments on the page, which you will see I'm going to do on this particular one, and also will allow me to attach it into the final journal once we put this all together. And I've had a little idea how I'm going to do that, which I will share with you when that time comes. Actually popped into my head this morning, so I'm hoping it's going to work. So the next thing that you want to do is gather together lots of embellishments that you want to use in your hairdo. I'm kind of creating myself a little bit of a fancy hairdo with lots of different little bits of embellishments. So I'm going to use some cogs, which kind of imitate the fact that there's lots of whirrings always going on in my brain. And I'm also going to be using flowers because hopefully I'm coming up with beautiful designs. So that's the kind of idea behind what I'm doing now. So I'm just going through all my stash and pulling together some elements that I'm going to use to build up extra texture around the head area of my image. And I want all of my pieces to have the same colouring, and I'm going to do that by painting them with this distress paint. And this is the evergreen bough, and I'm literally going to cover all my metallic elements and my flowers with this paint. And the distress paint will stick to metal and plastic, so once this is all dry it will be newly coloured to tone in with my design. So you can see I've got all sorts of little metal bits and pieces, numbers, cogs, pointers which I don't actually end up using, little screw heads and resin roses, all from various different people, Creative Expressions, Prima and Ranger, I think. Or maybe a little bit of Gorgeous as well. I think some of those bigger roses are from Santoro. So now how am I going to hold all these pieces onto my hairdo? I'm going to do that with this whipped spackle, which is Faber-Castell's embossing paste. It's very light, so it'll be quite a good thing to use in my journal. It's not going to end up too heavy. And I'm going to be using some Perfect pearls, which is a good thing to add to colour your embossing paste because it doesn't change the consistency of the embossing paste. But unfortunately, I haven't really got anything that's quite the right copper colour. Everything's a little bit red, so I'm going to have to add some paint into the mix. And it doesn't actually, as long as you're careful, detract too much from the viscosity, the thickness of the texture paste. Just be a little bit careful, but this, adding a little bit of the paint that I used originally on the background, will help me get nearer the colour. I'm just testing it here to make sure it doesn't go too runny, and you can see that that's working quite nicely. Just be a little bit careful not to add too much so that your paste becomes paint again. So I've moved that coloured paste to one side, and I'm going to make another smaller batch. This time I'm using a colour from a set that I've had for donkey's years, so I won't even tell you the name because it probably is not even in existence anymore. I think it was something like Moonglow, and I'm going to use this colour because it kind of goes with the turquoise that I've already got going on in my embellishments and looks like the sort of copper verdigris effect as well. So one thing that I will say to you that I noticed as I was working away at this is that the embossing paste does dry quite quickly if you're working in a very warm room, and I'm working in a quite central heated room, keeping cosy because it's quite cold outside, and I noticed that as I was working on the two areas it was starting to dry on me before I got all my elements nicely arranged in place. So my top tip is to keep a spray bottle handy, a spray bottle filled with water, and that way you can just give it a little spray to stop it drying every now and again. Don't go too heavy-handed, you don't want to create a great big puddle, but just a little mist just to keep this moist whilst you're working on it so that it really does act as a glue for the embellishments that you're going to put down. So I'm adding texture at this point. I am still thinking hairdo, so I'm trying to create a sort of lighter texture around my face area, fringe area, and then I'm filling in the rest of the hair and then just gradually blending that out with less and less paste as I work away from my head. And then I'm ready to start putting these embellishments into place. So I'm kind of doing a mirror image. So as I add one element, I'm adding the same element on the opposite side. And because I've got that nice thick layer of paste, these pieces should stick into that embossing paste. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of that green around the fringe area and then lightly around the outside, just to break up the colour a little bit of the embossing paste. And you can see how then it's kind of blending back in to the paint background that we created first. Now, another thing that you might want to use when you're working in this way is little pieces that you can use as fillers. Now, I did think I was going to use the turquoise beads from this old necklace, but they looked a little bit big. But I ended up using the wire, which was also turquoise coloured, and the little silver bead caps that came on the necklace. So I just felt the beads were a little bit too big, although they don't look too bad here. And you can see I'm adding a little bit of the silver bead caps, which looked a little bit like flowers, and then adding in some springs that I'm creating by wrapping that turquoise wire around a barbecue skewer. So again, it's all about creating a pleasing arrangement with the bits and pieces that you've got in your collection. These could be buttons, beads, little findings from old watches and old jewellery, as well as the elements that you've bought from people like Prima and Creative Expressions and Ranger, of course, who all do lovely embellishments that you can use for this kind of work. This is very reminiscent of what Finn does, Finnabar from Prima. She does similar kind of work by adding lots of textural elements to her art pieces. And this is the point where I felt things were drying up a little bit, so I just sprayed it with a little bit of water, and then I'm just filling in some of the design with some teeny tiny copper beads, and I've got some little turquoise sequins and beads which just give me a little bit of extra shine, as well as filling in and building up that textural headdress that I've created for myself. And whatever I do on one side, I'm going to repeat on the other. And then I'm going to use some contrasting stickles or complementary stickles, and I'm going to add little dots of glitter into the arrangement. So I'm using a green or a turquoise and a copper colour. So concentrating with sort of slightly bigger drops within the design, and then making them lighter and more spread out as I move around the head area towards the background. I also decided to give myself a little sparkly ring and earrings using the same two colours of stickles. Okay, so I think it needs something to lift the design a little bit. Everything's quite dark, so I'm going to bring some white into the mix, and I'm going to start by adding it into the design of the border. So I'm going to work my way all the way around the border, adding some white into the stripes, into the dots, and into the spaces in between. Now, another word to the wise, it's always worth knowing whether your pens are permanent or water soluble, because a bit later on I do a paint splattering technique, as you will see, and when I come to wipe it off the border, I wipe off the white pen. I mean, it's no hardship, it just means I have to do it again, but if I'd have thought about it, I could have left this doodling until the very end. So I'm just adding some white highlights into the polo neck of my jumper, and which I think was lilac if I remember rightly, and also into little areas on the jewellery, little dots on my eyes, and obviously into the doodled border. So the next thing that I'm going to do is just slightly darken the boundary of the border with a black paint pen. And it just neatens everything up along that edge. And I'm also going to go right around the very edge of the page, and of course along the bottom edge. And I think you can see here it would have looked nicer with that doodle border at the bottom, but maybe next time. So, in the interest of lots and lots of mixed media, I've decided to use my Pitt big brush markers to add some shadow into my face area. This is where I had to remove the glitter from my earring in order to be able to achieve this, and then I'll put the glitter back on later on. So because I've got that glossy surface, it allows me to add the ink from the big brush marker and then blend it out with my finger to create a shadow. And then once that's dry, it will be permanent. So just adding a little bit of shadow into my ear. And I did catch the metal element at this point, and I just thought it looked quite nice, so I'm going to add a little bit of that darker blue onto there. And I'm also adding some of that blue into little areas on this striped border. And I still felt that everything looked a bit neat and pristine at this point, and so I want to add some more aging, and I'm going to do that by adding some distress paint at the top of the page, giving it a good spray with my water spray and letting that drip down the page. So all I'm doing is, once I've got the drips that I want, I'm just going to take a tissue and remove the pieces that go over the stamped or the printed image. And I've really felt that this started to look aged at this point. So I've got a little bit too much paint at that top edge. I'm just going to blot that out a little bit, and then I want to do the same with white. So repeating that with some white acrylic paint, again adding the paint along the top edge and spraying profusely with water and encouraging it to drip down the page. Just removing it from my face. And then the border, and that's where the white came away, as you can see there, and I will put that back in once everything is dried up. So again, just removing the excess paint from along the top edge. So now for some splatter, and I did start by trying to cover up some of the areas where I didn't want the splatter to go, because see, I opt for the wiping off afterwards method, and I'm going to be using a fan brush for the first time here. I've seen other people use them, so I'm testing it out, and I think that it does work very well for making splatter. You do need to be careful though if you only want a little bit. If you only want a little bit of splatter, you need to really be careful how you manage how much paint is on your brush, but it does splatter very well. So I will be using this again, and I'm using it for black and white splatters on this particular page. So next up I need to remove my dotty complexion and I'm going to do that with a baby wipe. Okay, so now it's time to catch you up with my tag. I always make the tags match the page, and so I'm sticking first of all the two tags together to make sure this is more robust, and then I just need a border which I'm going to create in exactly the same way as I did on the page. So I'm not going to make you sit through all of that, but suffice to say is it is in order to make the tag look like it belongs with the page. And obviously whatever I do on one side, I need to repeat on the opposite side. And I'm going to stick the original inspiration, which is Tim's 12 tags of 2016 September tag. I'm going to outline that with some more of the black paint marker. And then I'm going to add the same details into the border that I added on the page. So lots of dots and stripes and white pen. So finishing off the border with the white pen detail. And I've created 2 strips, again using that same sort of patina effect with the paint. And I'm going to be using a couple of cogs in order to create the pull for the tag. So again, I'm just laying down some paint onto the cogs and the 2 paper strips. So the paper strips measure 6 inches by 3/4 of an inch. Now, the other thing that I needed to do was reinforce my page. Because this paper was slightly thinner so that I could put it through my printer, I now need to make it a little bit more robust to make sure it withstands the rigours of being opened and closed once it's in the journal. So I'm just reinforcing it with some card that I've cut slightly smaller than each side of the page. And then I'm gluing those into position prior to adding the strips to create the area for the tag. So if you remember rightly, as I put the pages together, we need to create a pocket for the tag itself in between the pages. So we do that by creating a channel so that the pocket fits in nicely without getting stuck. So this is the first half of the journal with all its tags in place. And then when we get to the end, you can see on my final page the channel that we're going to create. So it's always on the right hand side, and we're going to use 1/4 inch strips of card, and we're going to build them up 3 high. And that just gives us enough room to get our tags in and out without them sticking too much in between the pages. So it just gives it a little bit of leeway to make sure that the tags aren't too much of a struggle to pop in and out of your journal. Now, the trick to creating this sort of U-shape channel is to make sure that you avoid the very edge of your page, so roughly about 1/16 of an inch in from the edge, and also about 1/16 of an inch up from the fold or the gusset of the page. So I'm literally trimming them to fit as I go. And the other thing that you need to do is use glue. If you use double-sided tape, you'll have a sticky residue on the edge of your paper strips, and it's likely your tag will stick into the pocket forever. So use glue, it dries, and then it is no longer sticky. And we're also using glue as we put the 2 pages together. So this is my September page. So because I think I'm going to do this journal in 2 volumes because it's a bit thick as one. I haven't quite made up my mind. You'll see on the final video which one I go with. I will be attaching this to July and August, as this is September. So these are the second set of pages. So I've got July and August, and I need to add September. I've got November and December, so I've only got October left to go once I've got this finished. You can see how very, very different and how much fun you can have creating lots of different art throughout the year. Wherever your imagination takes you, you can have fun on a page each month, completely designed just for you to enjoy yourself and enjoy creating a piece of art that will remind you of your creative journey throughout the year. So I'm adding glue to those U-shaped or that U-shaped strip, making sure those pages line up well. The nicer you do that, the better your book will look when it's finished. Just testing the tag. It's probably best not to leave it in whilst that glue is drying. And obviously I'm not going to be able to join this together yet because I've still got October to go, but we've also got November and December, and that will just give you a little idea on how thick this book has become. So if I grab the other pages and put them all together as they are so far, plus these couple, and I will have one more which is roughly 1/4 of an inch more. I might still do it as one volume. Still not decided. So for the tag, I'm adding those metallic looking strips across the top, and you can see I've already added the picture of my apple butter. I tried to make a picture that looked a bit like it came out of a recipe book of my kitchen adventures, where I made some apple butter with the apples off our tree this September, which is something that I quite like to do, so I've journaled about that. And then I'm adding those metal cogs to the page in order to make it into a little pull at the top of the tag. So I'm obviously going to have to let that glue dry, but I'm also going to add a dot of the turquoise stickles to the middle of the cog just to finish off the tag. As usual, I'm adding the date, so September 2006, to the top of the tag. Then I wanted to add some words to my page, as I normally do, and these are my words, so not exactly a quote unless you repeat them, and then they might become a quote. So take your wonderful imaginings and make art. So literally just handwriting them across a strip, I'm going to separate all the words and stick them down on my page. And then I'm just going to glue it into position. So actually it says take your most wonderful imaginings and make art. So I did think they looked a little bit pristine here, and I wanted them to stand out a little bit more from the background. So whilst I was outlining them with my paint pen, I kind of smudged them a little bit. And then as I draw around the outside edge of the paper strips, I'm just lightly smudging them with my finger so they're not quite so bright against, or pristine against, the grungy background. And as a final finishing touch, just to make them a little bit shiny like my face, although I do try not to have a shiny face most of the time, I'm adding a little bit of Texture Gems, which is a product similar to Glossy Accents, but this one's by Faber-Castell, and then I'm smudging it rather than having it raised over the top of the words. So they look a little bit shiny but not raised. So yay, my voice has made it to the end of the video, and I hope you've enjoyed it and it hasn't put you off too much that I sound full of cold. So until next time, I really hope this inspires you to create journal pages of your own. I'm looking forward to starting the 2017 series in the middle of February, so I'll bring you more news of that later. Until then, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button and the share button, and I will be joining you again very shortly for that final page and showing you how to bind this journal. Until then, thank you for watching. The final links are to the playlist for this entire journal series, so the 2016 journal playlist, where you'll find pages like the November and December and exactly how to put them together. And then last but not least, a link to my Etsy shop where you'll find workshops like this one. This is a baby cake with a mini album inside. It makes a great keepsake gift, looks fab when it's all wrapped up in cellophane, and makes a lovely baby shower gift for somebody to be able to put together all their memories of the first year of the baby. And this actually comes with all the prompts that you can add to the little scrapbook that goes inside. And once you can make one, you can make lots of different kinds of cakes like this gorgeous wedding cake with 3 separate albums inside. So if you want to create along with me and make something beautiful like this, then you can just pop along to my Etsy shop and you'll be able to get your workshop today. I look forward to seeing you over there.